It's always exciting times when you turn on your slides and you're in a testing conference and everyone is telling you just before you get started that the likelihood of things failing is just about the highest that it ever can be when you're in a room full of testers. Seems this test case passed, and there's been plenty of other test cases over the years that I've been kind of part of, and that's why today we're talking about impact. I've been in testing for like 26 years, I think. That's kind of how it counts. I was celebrating my silver jubilee, meaning 25 years, because, like I felt like Queen of England is a good, reference to look for things in how you celebrate. But realizing that it's again been, plus 1 year, and the years just kind of, pass by, and you do fun stuff every single day of your career. I think that's been the greatest thing of all of them. My job as a tester, and no matter what title I have ended up taking over the years, I'm still a tester by heart. My job has always been about feedback. So I start conversations. Some say I start trouble. I bring out things that other people might not always welcome. There's been this running joke about testers being the ones telling people that, the baby is ugly, but in a kind way. So one of the conferences that I was here in Hungary before, a craft conf, I remember there was another speaker in the speakers dinner, because it's a cross-role event. They were asking me kind of like, what do I do? Like, explain it to me like I was 5, or explain it to me like I didn't know anything. And apparently saying kind of they didn't know much of testing. And I remember just like not being able to explain it, and then afterwards realizing that I should have told them that I'm a feedback fairy. I come with the gift of feedback. The feedback might be that the baby is ugly, but I try to bring it, in a way that is kind and friendly and, like actually cares about the recipient of the message, because that's what we do. We care. We deliver feedback and we care. And we care, because we want to have fun at work, we want to be impactful at work, we want to actually do things that are useful to our organizations and useful to us so that our careers grow. So looking at kind of, having done this now for 26 years, there's plenty of stories that I could draw from. Like, there's, probably some very positive stories, kind of like, things that have been fun and useful. There's probably many failures on my route as well. And there's all kinds of experiences of not just testing the products, but testing the organizations. Testing the people, testing the communications, figuring out how do you bring people together with the idea of feedback is the core of what we do. So we, the testers, who anyone is doing testing, is trying to add something to the knowledge base of what we have in our products, projects, and provide some extra feedback, something that we didn't know beforehand. So let's look at a couple of stories of me doing something that I would call testing. Like I have a few things that I wanted to kind of start with as stories. So I find that going on stages, I collect the stories. I have written thousands of blog posts about my stories so far. I have shared them on conference stages. But one of the stories that I find myself very often thinking and telling, one that kind of defines me in many ways, is the one where I work with a developer. Because again, a lot of the times we are in the service industry as testers. The developers test. Testing is too important to be left just for testers. Everyone tests. But it's also too important to be left without specialists and without kind of centered attention. So one of the stories I end up telling a lot is, what does it feel like, or what does it look like when we're testing? A couple of years back, I paired up with a developer. They had created, with test-driven development, a product of their own. And the reason why I was pairing up with that particular developer was that I wanted to do a conference session on API exploratory testing. And I wanted to take something that has no user interface so that I don't actually have to go to the REST APIs, but kind of like take away the whole user interface and work on the level of the developer experience and exploring that. And just apply the basic, regular exploratory testing, systematic skills that we need in order to do that kind of work. I started testing. I interviewed the developer a little bit because kind of like, there was no real good documentation. There was documentation, but I thought the documentation was all useless. It didn't answer any of the questions that I had in the first go. And let's face it, why would I spend half an hour reading documentation that I already know is not valuable when I can spend the half an hour talking to that developer, getting the documentation that should exist, and I can write it down. I start from there. I can end with the documentation that has been created, but I started with the interview. So he listed these claims of like, it's supposed to do this, and these are the things that are supposed to be consistent, and these are the things, and these are my design ideas. Like really lovely conversation, very quick conversation, and I created a mind map of things I was about to do. Then I started testing. The first thing I set up is that particular piece of code on my own IDE, Visual Studio Code, which was the free version, because obviously I didn't have the licenses available for all of the fancy stuff that developers were using in that moment. So I had a Visual Studio Code, a couple of dependencies to that library, and nothing worked. That was about 5 minutes into the actual testing after interviewing, kind of like on what is this even about. So I couldn't even get it running, so the first bug fix came on like maybe at 40 minutes, and then it continued like that, rounds and rounds of kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about that too. Like many different kinds of observations. And a year later, that particular developer went on a podcast, Cucumber podcast, and said, I was very proud of that code. I had written it all test first. I had plenty of users for that code. None of them ever complained. But when she touched it, she somehow managed to destroy it in like an hour and a half. I think the fair statement is I probably used more like a half a day on that first round. And before he went on that podcast, I actually spent time 2 hours in a conference in USA with that as the test target. Some of that developer's favorite colleagues from the Agile community in that session doing ensemble programming to test, exploratory test, that particular piece of code. And that's how he decided that he needs to rewrite the entire API, which was what I told him in the first couple of hours. But he needed to see his peers deliver that message. So, these are the type of stories that I actively create. It's not that I just, deliver the bug report and put it in a Jira somewhere. I find your colleagues that you respect, and I make them show you that I'm right, or I make them show you, or actually show me that I'm wrong. Sometimes that too happens. But a lot of times, people don't want to hear just me delivering that message. They want to hear someone else. And I'm in the feedback business, like all of you. So I need to do the extra legwork sometimes to get the message across. And, if you have an API that could be better, and you have a way of delivering that message in a concrete kind of like, a shared experience format with the people that you care, your customers are very typical ones. Bring those two together and you probably will do good. Does this sound familiar? Kind of like finding a lot of bugs, having started conversations. Anyone done that? At least a few people here, not everyone. And this is, these kind of stories are what makes testing awesome. Like when you get to these stories, you are going to love every day of your work. So making the effort is personally worthwhile for every single one of us. So we used the word here, destroying. Did I really destroy the program? Anyone thinks that was what I did? So you've probably heard the old age story that, testers don't break programs, we only break illusions. The only thing was broken was the illusions of that particular developer. And he was a really, good champ about all of those illusions, and even, having his illusions broken in front of his, people that he was looking up to in conferences. And that's not always obvious in all of the cases. So sometimes you get really special kind of collaborations going on with people, and it takes some effort to foster that. So I think, this is negative words, positive story in many ways. Another story that I find myself telling even more often is one that when the product owner says something like this, I need to write it down, and I wrote this down in my CV when the product owner said it. And I asked him, can I quote you on this in my CV? So it's still in my CV, available, from a few years back. And I would probably have forgotten about all of this already if I wasn't collecting the story in the moment. So when you ever hear a thing where someone is surprised positively by the work you do, write it down. And CVs are, by the way, great places of writing those stories down. So I wrote down the idea from this product owner that he was surprised that software can actually work when it gets delivered to you. And I was actually puzzled by the idea that it can also not work. And seriously, 20 years you've been running a successful business on it not working when you got it? So again, reminding that context in software is kind of vast. Sometimes we have a lot of problems to find. Sometimes we don't have the time or even the need of picking all of them up. Someone else can do some of that testing work later on. But sometimes it actually needs one of us, one of the testers, some of the testers, maybe even teams of testers, maybe teams of developers and testers in order to work through the number of bugs that there needs to be. I also wrote down how many bugs we needed to find. 2,261 issues that got fixed out of the ones that I reported over a period of 2.5 years. The starting point for that particular product was that they knew, as a development team, they knew that they had 18% of logins ending up in a big visible error screen because they were, having metrics around those. But they told me that they have no clue how those error screens appear. I couldn't even touch that software without seeing an error screen. And we got down to about 0.5% over that period of time of reporting those. But actually, me logging all of those bugs, I don't think that was the key to this particular story. That was not the impact that I made. It's definitely visible work that I was doing. I can easily tell that I did something that is worth my salary. But when I realized after 2.5 years that the next 1.5 years I could stop reporting a single bug, so that I can't collect these statistics in that particular organization, I could make the choice of finding a bug, pairing with a developer, creating a test case that reproduces it, teaching the developer skills about things that they were missing, the information that they didn't have, that they were always getting through the error messages or the error descriptions that I was writing. When I realized I could go and pair with the people, I didn't need to log the 2,000 bugs. They vanished. I needed to log, tens, hundreds maybe, in total over the next 1.5 years. And the entire experience of delivering that software was completely different. So for me, this particular story of an impact was one where I realized that, I can, easily do the, whatever the instructions are saying, kind of create this kind of listing of bugs, making all the new information visible. But if I take a step further, if I take a step that actually fixes the developer in a way, and it's not like the developer was broken in any other things that they don't get the right information at the right time. If I can fix that, if I can fix typos as I write them so that I don't have to have a conversation about typos or write a bug report about typos, I can fix them myself and have someone review the pull request where I fix the typos. It's going to create this kind of an atmosphere where we're all doing things together. And this particular story I tell you because this is, I think, the pet peeve that I have in this industry, that we still teach testers that we are providing information, we are not doing the fixes, we are not doing the decisions, and I call BS on that. We are trying to get the things acted on. And if us acting on them is the most efficient way of working, we should be acting on them. And the unit of work nowadays is not me, it's not the developer, it's us together, and that's called a team. Some people like to say that testers are developers just like anyone else, but I kind of like the idea of keeping my title, my identity, thing that I have built on for years. I don't mind being a polyglot programmer, I'm that too. It's not like you have to be one or the other, but I would not want to give up on my identity. So my suggestion is we should maybe call all of us team members then, if we need to, switch between these kind of roles. So again, is this story something that, any of you have done? Anyone had an impact like this? I think there's always a few people at least. It's a little bit more complicated than the first one, kind of like getting to actually change the organization, change the atmosphere, change the way that we communicate. And again, it's mostly a positive impact, right? But an impact of feedback. The next story that I wanted to share with you is one that I find that I have now repeated 10 times. Like, I find it's almost boring now because it happens in every single new team that I'm joining. And it's actually usually the reason why people drag me into various teams, and why in Vaisala, where I'm now working, I haven't been allowed to stay in the same team usually for more than a year. So over the 3.5 years that I've spent in Vaisala, I've already had 4 different teams and 5 different positions. Because one of the things that always in every single project needs to be fixed is this idea of, it takes so long for us to release. We have this release testing that's going to take, weeks and months and whatever time frame. And there's a lot of uncertainty. We have somehow piled up the work so that it's all on the tester's table, the uncertainty at the release time. This change, having done this kind of transformation quite many times, a lot of people think it starts with automating. But it actually doesn't start with automating. It starts with prioritizing. And it starts with being around on the smaller changes. When you change something, you test it, you have the information available right then. And even if it sometimes means that you're repeating same or similar things, you introduce the automation to take away that repetition, one day at a time, one test at a time. And for me, it's kind of like a frame of what I call contemporary exploratory testing. It's not manual work, the exploratory testing. It's not, just user's perspective. It's API, unit level, any level as well. But automation is documentation, and automation is creating a safety net with that documentation, and automation is creating reach of being available at 2 a.m. in the morning when you would rather be sleeping. So you can still have testing done, exploring done at that moment of time. So it's always this unattended versus attended type of testing, and balancing that so that every day makes you just a little bit better. So again, the continuous mindset, the active building for the better tomorrow, that's where we built that impact. Last week was my last time of going through the motions of shortening release cycles. And it was slightly different last week. On Monday, we created a embedded device recipe to create a release on Monday. Then we waited until Thursday, and the other team, the pull request, wasn't approved. So I called the person saying, hey, you have the pull request, can you press the button? It came immediately. Like, why on earth are people waiting? Why aren't we calling sooner? Why aren't we pairing with the people and going and explaining the thing that we need done? Why are we expecting that? Oh, sorry. Yeah, this one. Going backwards. So why are we doing it that way? That we are, expecting that this is somehow coming to us. The other thing I did, we needed 6 approvals more. So we have a security approval, We have a technical quality approval. We have a open source license use approval. We have a documentation approval. We have system testing approval. And then we have production approval, basically that production is ready to accept all of that. I send an email putting my personality in. Like usually the emails are super boring. Like I hate reading them. I usually look at them, same thing, you know, I'll come back to it later. But I put my personality in that email and said like, hey, if you don't answer my email today, you know, by this time, I'm gonna call you. We haven't caught up for a moment, you know, like we should maybe talk. 6 minutes, and I had 4 of the 6 approvals. 6 minutes. And it's usually a 2-week thing to wait. So again, find your personality. You are not me, and I don't expect you to be me. But I expect every one of you to be yourself. So find that, you know, twist that you can bring in your organization that enables not just, you know, queuing things for waiting and you doing something else in between, but actually finding the way of collaborating. So there might be multiple reasons why it takes us a little longer. The 4th story that I wanted to tell is the one which is maybe not equally positive. It's why this is today my number 50th keynote, my 527th talk, and I am retiring from conference speaking. It's because I got on a stage like this with professionals like you in June, and one of the audience decided to leave anonymous feedback. So I am actively calling you not to do stupid things in anonymous feedback, because the feedback that we give as professional testers have an impact. The feedback that I got was that, well, my talk was bad. That's fine, you know, I'm okay with hearing that, you know, I'm not clear and you don't quite, you know, sync with me. All of that is fine, you can always say that. But that feedback didn't stop there. The feedback said that all of my talks are bad. You know, with the sample size 527, it sounds like quite many things that this person knew of. And it said, for the life of them, they can't understand why would anyone ever let me keynote. For the life of them, they wouldn't be able to understand why someone with a 25 years of hands-on testing career would be allowed on this stage. I think that's false, and I don't believe that feedback. That's not the problem. But I think that feedback was abusive, and from a group of professional testers specializing in feedback. It was particularly abusive. So, you know, to tell the story of we are supposed to care about the feedback, you know, recipient, I decided that this is the last excuse that I need in order to do what I have already wanted to do, focus on other things, and then use this as a training mechanism. I have been sharing this on social media, and I know who left me the feedback. Because if you are, you know, physically so angry with what I'm saying here from the stage, that the person behind you can see that you are, you know, insulted by my presence here on the stage, they are probably normally not reading your anonymous feedback that you're typing in that moment. But if you look physically so angry, they are probably gonna look. And in this case, the person behind, the person who left the feedback, happened to be a Finnish woman, and kind of in my network, just like the person who was leaving the feedback. So again, for me, it's, you know, comforting to know that it wasn't someone from Finland who left the feedback. You know, Finns know Finns. And it was comforting to know that it was not a woman, because I would, you know, take women's misbehavior a little bit more seriously. I'm kind of used to being explained by men a lot. So, you know, that's a small difference. But knowing that it was one of my peers, it still irks me to this day. So the power of feedback, what we have, can be very, very different. So kind of, we're looking at a balance. We are trying to tell people babies are ugly, sometimes, and how the babies need to be made prettier. And it's not always an easy way of saying that. So sometimes you will hurt someone's feelings. Like, you know, days since I made person cry last Friday. Definitely not an intentional impact that I would like to make. But if I ever end up being abusive in my feedback, I really need to take a step back and assess my professional skills. And if I am continuously delivering feedback in a way where people have to cry, I am not doing something right. I need to fix that. But if I'm getting, on the balance, if I'm getting also feedback that some people have become testers because I exist, because we had a conversation, because I helped, or they have become public speakers because of that, that's kind of a nice thing to have on the balance as well. But what I'm trying to kind of say with this one is that sometimes the bad comes with the good, but you have the choice of, not letting, you have to have thick skin control you, but also you can choose, whichever way. You don't have to do anything for the others. You can think about kind of what's your happiness, what's your impact, what's the thing that you want to build. So these are the typical stories that I kind of tell. But these stories are really founded on the idea of, being around for a while. The position that I have nowadays is one of a development manager. There's not even a senior in my title anymore. And I'm trying to still be okay with that. Like I used to be a principal test engineer. It sounded really fancy. But this year, since I had 2 managers that I needed to cross over from my team and move elsewhere so that we could have a really true, agile, kind of self-organized team where even the manager does hands-on work, so that I could build that vision of no product owner again, which I have done at some point of my career, I needed to change my title a little bit. So titles, roles, years, we need to talk about those a little bit. I can say, with 26 years of experience or sampling, that it's probably a career. For me, at least, it's a career. If it's a career for me, and it's been a career that I have been able to create for many other people, I'm pretty sure that there will be a career in testing, even in the future. The titles might be different. I talked to Chris here in the first row this morning. She's a product owner, but really a tester, really a tester. There's plenty of managers, really testers. They are really testers. And there's a ton of developers, really testers. So don't care about the title, care about the work you enjoy doing, care about the stretching you are doing, and that's how you will have that career. My career, kind of in one slide, I'm not going to go through all of the different details here. On the top, you can see my salaries over the time. So again, a reminder, I have always worked in Finland in Finnish companies. So, take the numbers that I share, the euros that I share, as real data, but on me from a particular market. So they are not, any averages. They are real numbers on when did I end up getting what title and how that reflected in my salary. So becoming, principal tester manager, that shift really doesn't have a big impact on my salary anymore. Or maybe actually, in a way, it has a negative impact on my salaries, because while I was being not a manager and not responsible for 20 other people, I could go, to conferences a lot more. I could do all kinds of trainings a lot more, and they pay really well. They actually double your salary, so that, side business is not in the numbers. This is just the salary that they pay me for a regular 37.5-hour job. So if I have had like hobbies, or other secondary work, it's not in the numbers. The other thing on the top, or on the bottom here, that you can see is, over 26 years, there's many different areas that I have, focused on a certain time. It's not like I always knew test environments as well as I know them now. But there was like a period of 2 years where I was doing work on the IBM mainframe computers, and when your test environment costs 1 million euros, and it takes 1 year to deliver, and it has connections to, different levels of organization that have conflicting needs, you're gonna learn how to design those things exceptionally well. The sampling that I have is not a sampling that you have to follow. It's just whatever happened to me. Like, I have taken whatever is, available me in that moment. And your sampling probably looks a little different than mine. But pay attention to the fact that it's accumulating over time. So that you're not just, repeating the exact same thing. You can have an angle, maybe you can add some parafunctional testing, maybe some performance perspectives into whatever you're doing. So that's definitely a big part. But also, over that timeline, one of the things I would, encourage you to take a look at is the idea that at first I became a tester because someone told me that I could do testing, because I could read the Greek alphabet. That was the only thing that I needed to become a tester back in the days. So I tested Greek Microsoft Office. Still, for the life of me, I have no idea why we would test that in Finland. But that's how it went. And it took me quite many years before I really kind of owned up to the idea of exploratory testing, documentation as an output, learning actively while testing. And only when I owned up to that, I really started feeling like I'm actually going to be good at this. And until that, it was, a thing that I was kind of doing because other people were telling me that. So agency, kind of taking this central role in all of that was relevant. And it was quite long before I got a management title. It's not like they weren't pushing that on me, like pretty much from 3-4 years on. They were trying to make me a test manager of all sorts and even a manager of whole teams. And like, oh no, I don't want to even go to that management training. And if there's one thing that I regret saying no to in my life, is that when at F-Secure back in the days, I had a manager who told me to go into management training and tried to convince me that he's not trying to make me a manager, he's trying to build my networks. I wished I understood what that meant. That actually, even as an individual contributor, knowing the people and managing up in an elevator with people you have a relationship with, it's like a superpower to your impact. But I said no, and I became a manager only at a time when I realized that job crafting is a thing. So kind of like a couple of things that were really pivotal here on things I learned. Well, exploratory testing, just knowing that it exists, but actually growing it into being in control myself, and then it includes automation with contemporary exploratory testing. That's definitely been something. Being part of the academic circles, reading hundreds of books on testing, and becoming a walking vocabulary, definitely been my thing. The fact that I got on stage, even though I had this crippling fear of stages, it goes away when you practice enough. So I think, around 500 was, already fine. So, there's always hope, just practice. The whole Agile movement, I started with that very early on, and it's been very transformative to me. The whole pairing and ensembling, group work, kind of one computer, whole group working together. I would not know how to learn things I don't know, that I don't know, if I didn't see people doing them in the moment. I'm like, what's that thing that you just did? Like, can you teach me that? Like, please, tell me what you did. And there's no way they can tell me without sounding like they're explaining things that I might already know. And often, it's often a miss when they try to explain to me. Or other ways, kind of just seeing that in action. But this job crafting, this idea that I can make the manager's job look so much like a tester's job that it's confusing every other one around me. And I can then explain that and share the management, kind of, the work that usually is assigned to manager with the rest of the team. I can have paired feedback sessions within the team and facilitate those. And I can have sessions that are built actually around, let's test together, and then we'll talk about how well we did this one. What can we learn out of this one? So kind of like turning the practical as part of the management work. So job crafting, make any job you have the job you want. That's the idea. So bring the elements that make you happy, but explain what elements you left out intentionally. So be visible of that. My career, I also realized this at some point, that if I've been around 26 years, probably not everyone has had equally long time. So apparently there's this saying that software industry nowadays doubles every 5 years, which would mean, that the age difference or the age graph that we saw earlier in the opening of the conference, probably, if we were a representative group of the industry, half of us would have less than 5 years of experience. So doing all the things and all the tricks that I have learned to do, don't mind about that. Add one to your own day. You're only competing with yourself. And use these talks that we have throughout the conference as inspirations of what that one thing could be that you start practicing, experimenting with, learning if it works as a tool in your hand, and if you actually want to shape it in a bit different way. And a lot of the conference talks are actually born from the fact that we have shaped someone else's tool a little differently so that it fits our hand better and we can use it in a better way. So we usually need teams of people with less than 5 years of experience. So looking at that, in my team, I have actually in over 3 teams right now, I have 2 people with a title tester, but I have actually 6 people who I think of as you know, they are exhibiting very much things that I would, you know, I could be calling them testers. The first one is kind of a very much a traditional developer, or like a modern developer, I would say, actually. So everything he intends the code to do ends up in automation, and it reads beautifully. Like listening to him and the product owner read those through and having those conversations of what we have missed, I love that example-driven kind of like collaboration that you can see. The second one is also a developer by title. I might actually, you know, suggest that they could try using tester by title, but if they would use a tester title, their experience was that they would be paid less. So they have, you know, relevant amount of more money by labeling themselves as a developer because they're a programmer as well. And they kind of work through a problem at a time, then fixing the problem. Actually, it's the first one. The second one is the thorough intent capture. Third one, tester by title, domain specialist, really good at finding things that, you know, customers would care for and appears magical to some other people. Fourth one is kind of like, you know, if you give me a list, I can always tell you whether it's true or not. Very traditional tester, but there's also work for that kind of area. The fifth one is kind of like a collaborative, exploratory system-level tester, builds automation, documents with automation, does really good automation scripts in many ways and leaves that behind. And then the sixth one, that's kind of me in my current management role. Last time I tested yesterday, I closed 4 bugs and I retested those, so that was the contribution. But they were bugs that I had also logged, so it felt like a thing I should be doing. And I somehow managed to see kind of, you know, behind the corner. And I don't think you can get this in one person. Not in me, but not in anyone. And some of these things you will start noticing in the developers around you. And you will grow them with agency. On 2007, I kind of, you know, created a slide about career, saying career is something where, you know, the results matter, the impact into results really matter for your career, the stories that you can tell around that. And maybe we define it by money, but money is always relative. Maybe we define it by power, you know, who will listen to us without us having to fight. But I don't think power works that way. Influence doesn't work that way. It's not like they, you know, automatically listen to you. You have to find those routes. Having to not struggle going to work, having enough fun so that it's an enjoyable experience. You know, great colleagues are great at providing that fun. So no matter how boring things otherwise might appear, it's really a great one. And in testing, if you figure out that you always have the next place where you can grow and you're growing yourself for your own future, that's how you probably will end up having that career. But the more recent version of the career thinking for me is that you really need to look at balance between 2 kinds of aspects in your individual contributor work, or even a manager work. Tailoring that work so that there's some things where you do the work that the team needs. Even the kind of work that is not normally assigned to a manager. Maybe you can take, you know, half a day to do some exploratory testing. You are a lot better manager when you know what the feeling with the product is. Even if it wasn't, you know, thorough and well-coverage, researched thing. But productive is the ideas where you are doing something that the team needs doing. And generative is the idea of making more productive people out of others. So you help someone else, you pass important information in a timely fashion. There's so many ways for us to be generative. And it's not just kind of like, showing up on the pairing sessions, which just happens to be my go-to mechanism. Test automation and documenting with test automation, it's a generative thing. Because when you leave the organization, like you could see, I have not been a faithful person for my organizations. I used to switch jobs every 2 years. When I realized that I am more impactful and more valuable when I leave some automation behind that does some of the things that I learned to do over the 2 years. Even if that wasn't 100% coverage, it's probably better than not leaving that behind. And finding that balance of, now and later, productive and generative. It's been really important. So, to kind of summarize all of this, there's career in testing, most definitely. Your career will look different than mine. But my career probably, serves as a sampling place or for some of the things that have been important for me. But there's also like a strong survivorship bias. Like, this is what I did. And what I did and what I got away with might not work on you. And if you are getting, feedback that don't do this, this is, awful, maybe, just ring me, call me, let me know that we can adjust the thing that, I would do so that it's appropriate for your organization and your personality. Even though I don't get on the stage anymore, I don't broadcast. I'm no longer looking at the scope of, all of us in one room. I am looking for meaningful, high-quality conversations. And I think some of these things that I have managed to do myself, there's implicit parts to them that only you can help me figure out. So if anything at all is interesting out of my experiences, please come and talk to me. I'm happy to talk, throughout the night on the conference on any and everything that is on the slides and even outside the slides. So, testing is kind of a passion project in many ways. But I kind of, for the last 6 months, since I've known that I'm coming here, I've been on day-to-day basis collecting observations of, what are the things that have changed over the years for me, and what are now changing, what are the relevant things that I keep repeating that help me having conversations at work. And I came up with these 10. It's, some kind of a prioritized list already. I already left quite many things outside, or I kind of combined them. But then I also realized I can't talk to you about all of the 10 here today. Like, it's going to be way too much. It's not possible to do that on a stage. So I have to choose a few, and a few, 3 always sounds like a good number. So the ones that I've chosen to talk about today are collaborative credit, because I think it's really essential that we understand that. Telling stories and including numbers with the stories. So giving up on metrics, but kind of including metrics with every single story you get. You are probably going to be listened to a lot better when you come up with a number that also illustrates that. Even if it's not completely honest and not completely true, and you can explain even how the number can be interpreted. And the third one that I want to talk about is opportunity cost. So from stories, I find that the simple stories that we tell, or which I tell kind of on repeat, go into these 3 main stories. One is from Kemp Gaynor. Kemp Gaynor used to say that, testers who can't report bugs well are like fridge lights that are only on when the door is closed. Not much use, right? So if we don't have those relationships, if we don't have those conversations, if we don't actually manage to write things down so that people can take them if they are now really busy, take them, like if we don't follow up, we just expect to leave it there and somehow the process to take care of it, and it doesn't always. If we don't do the follow-up, we are not doing the right thing. So I find myself telling this particular story again, and again at work. And I have already heard this story 2001. So I have had a few repetitions. Another one that I have noticed that I'm telling in the last 6 months particularly is invisible ink. I test for half a day, and I tell that I think we're going to report 150 bugs. And then they're like, why do you think we're going to find 150 things to fix here? I have a feeling. Like, where does that feeling come from? I see the invisible. I'm happy to be wrong. If the invisible that I'm seeing is, if I'm really hallucinating, I would love to be wrong. But unfortunately, now that we're at 70, a little over, I'm pretty sure 150 is a little understatement in the current state of a particular product where I had to say this. So kind of my work around invisible ink is that I can bring it visible also with a lot of uncertainty. And then the work is just kind of raising the certainty against that number. And a third story that I find myself repeating is that sometimes, actually way too often, I end up in teams where I feel like my job as a principal, high-paid testing person is to pick up pizza boxes that kids leave on the living room floor. Like somehow, it's not that the developers wanted to leave them there, but the organizations have created a space in which we live as if we had no rules, as if, you're supposed to leave it where you are because you are too valuable for testing work, or your manager is not giving you enough room, or you don't consider that taking a shower happens unless you tell them specifically, your kids, that they need to take a shower. I have a teenage boy, so I feel like, I have sometimes needed to do this one as well. But, the idea of we teach our kids about the pizza boxes at some age of their lives. And they learn that, and they want to kind of, contribute to the common good. And if that still keeps happening, there is usually something kind of in the environment, in the system that we've created that leaves people little other choices. But for me, then the work of a tester is not picking up those pizza boxes, but it's walking with the people who left the pizza boxes and making them share the pain of pizza boxes so that they will vanish. And this is one of the stories that I find myself telling. I tell stories with numbers, particularly now around productivity. I like the idea of this space framework, kind of like, we used to have this idea of metrics need to be from multiple different perspectives, like a balanced scorecard. That was the thing of, 80s, 90s, whenever that was the thing. I think this is a return of balanced scorecard, but it's on productivity, kind of like remember that there's these modern different words that we want to talk about around productivity. The number that I've been now following is how much does it cost per pull request? Because I own budget. I have to pay everyone's salaries out of that budget. So I have a number of how much it costs. And I can tell that with my more modern team, the one that is kind of now moving to the vision that I have, they have cut down the cost per pull request by keeping the profile still the same kind of things by 80%. In 2 quarters this year. And the main impact, 63% cut, was from stopping blocking pull request reviews. So we are reviewing on request, like, if someone wants to ask for pairing, we pair, but we no longer leave it in the queue and try to come up with something else to do while we're waiting for someone to have time to review the pull request. So a lot of small things have a really huge impact. And knowing that I have 2 teams where one of them has about 7 times more expensive pull requests, I know that it's a historical thing of the organization as well, but it's also a history that we are now starting to work on changing. So telling the story with numbers is relevant. Similarly, I might, as a tester, I might tell stories like, you have to test login, you have to maybe automate the login tests. These are from an actual project here on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is material that I used to use when I teach at university on how you document your login tests. And it was kind of funny looking at the data from a real project of what did I actually find when I was exploring on top of that. Well, if you log in, you have to be able to log out. We couldn't. If you log in, it actually has to happen, in a relevant amount of time. All that kind of things. And if you have multiple different components with the concept of session length and you can configure it in weird ways, you're going to see such wonderful bugs. So some of those bugs, they bring me joy, and then they vanish, but I remember and I write them down, sometimes into talks like this. But what doesn't bring me joy is that I still go back 6 months later, and I look at the actual production data. And having tested that particular thing and realizing that the login was that much unavailable, didn't bring me joy. So there is most definitely something that even if I built on top of those basic login tests, a lot of things, I still missed many things. And obviously this is something that I'm using as a helper in the next project. So reliability testing while in testing, seeing how things run in realistic environments are kind of like a thing. Collaborative crediting, I find another really important lesson for me. At some point, I was ready to quit testing because someone was awarded from my work of 10 years in the Finnish community. They received an award that I still haven't received. I had many awards from other, communities that seem to have appreciated me since, but one that still kind of irks me a little bit, and it made me quit for a while all of the volunteering work because it felt so unfair that someone was rewarded for, hard work that I did in the background. They did some of it as well, so we really need to learn about collaborative crediting, because if we don't learn to say that the thing was a mutual success and always keep bringing us up the other ones as well, what we get is new test techniques are the same test techniques, and then we're just spending all of our energy in trying to figure out how are these, like slightly different, but because we seek credit, and credit is gained by naming things like baby dinosaurs or dinosaurs in general. We really want to give a new name so that it's our name and our thing. It's a human trait in many ways. So last week, performance testing-wise, I had a tester kind of knocking on my door saying, hey, I found this bug, the entire environment is completely down. There's a performance problem. Like, I can take credit for this? I'm like, yeah, sure you can. Half an hour later, we had a daily meeting, and the developer reports, oh, I have been fixing this memory leak, not mentioning the tester, by the way, who found the memory leak in an environment that was otherwise not looked at. But I found this, like memory leak, and I have now fixed the memory leak. It was like really quick fix thing after we knew that it existed. And we didn't really ask, like, can I take the credit for this? But kind of like saying, I am already taking the credit for this because I'm fixing it right now. And I was kind of like in the background smiling and like, that environment exists and that tester went to that environment because I said we need that environment. Is it my credit? And it is actually all of us. And that's how software development really works. So we need to be better at collaborative crediting. Finally, opportunity cost. I've chosen 3 topics on this talk. So I've chosen some things that I didn't speak for you. When you choose to write documentation, you're choosing not to execute some test cases. When you're choosing to write test cases before you execute your tests, the non-exploratory style, you are choosing that, but you are also spending less time on the application. They are choices that you can do and you should do. And making those choices in a smart way, that's what exploratory testing is really about. You are not only optimizing the fast track of today, but you're also optimizing the happiness of the future and your unavailability, because you will leave for a conference. You can be away, you are not so needed that you can't be away for a full week. And only by looking at the opportunity cost, you can get to that. And the main thing in opportunity cost that I think we are doing wrong right now in the industry is our attitude on automation. We keep talking a lot about, warning about, how automation is insufficient. Trust us, trust me, the directors know this already. They are not expecting 100% foolproof automation of you, but they are all expecting something a little bit better every single day. And they're okay with the fact that programming is manual work. They are okay with the fact that writing automation is also manual work. And you don't need to spend half an hour, half a day, every single week on selling that idea, when you can sell the same idea opportunity cost first by showing them the little thing that you could do when you didn't spend your time on the sales argument. So pay attention how much planning, how much selling we are doing. So 10 things, we got through 3. That was kind of the idea here. And especially the ones around radiating intent and not being a leader but the follower, they are so important to me. The only thing that I would hope is we continue the conversations, pick up good stuff from every single session, and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
You are simply amazing. I love it when I don't need to ask the people to applaud because you get it by yourself. Are you ready for the questions?
I am.
We have 8 votes for the first question, 9 now. Do you have any tips on giving good feedback and how to take into consideration the impact we have when giving critical test feedback?
I have a lot of things that I would like to say about feedback. First one is whoever is recipient of feedback should be actively seeking the feedback that they want. Don't just wait for patiently, someone else to give that to you. There's a very great book on that idea. And the other one is, I usually say critical feedback is best given fresh and in private. Kind of like, after you have a thing concretely in your mind, give the feedback in private. But having recently learned that some people find it they get a sense of priority if they get it too fast. For me right now, my advice for me is write it down so that you can give it to this particular person only once a week. So adjust it to whoever is receiving it so that it can be given in a trustful and neutral environment.
I love this next one. It very quickly got 30 likes. What is your favorite way of delivering the news? The baby is ugly.
So I do say sometimes that, but not very much at work. So usually it's very concrete on like, hey, let's demo this. I show you like an actual problem that we have. So the baby is ugly is just something that I learned over the years, and it comes out, very easily, even if that's the one that I try to withhold in the day-to-day life.
Thank you. How often should one change workplace nowadays? Few years, 5 years, or is it still okay to spend decades at the same company? What do you think?
I think it's still okay. Like, there's many of us, and there's as many ways of doing this as there are people. Some people will change every 6 months and be successful with that. Some people will stay 10 years, 20 years, even the whole career in the same company and be successful with that. I don't think it's either or. If you are moving a lot, like I was, find a theme that unites it. It's not a good reason to change jobs just for changing jobs or just say that you change it for salary increases. If you say that you're learning, that you're excited about context-driven testing and testing being different in different organizations and repeating the same experiences so that you can be more effective in changing and helping the organizations. That seems to be a good sales argument in my experience. But again, survivorship bias is definitely having an impact on me.
Perfect. What do you think about a separate testing team?
Sorry?
What do you think about a separate testing team?
I don't have one nowadays. I try to usually bring them down. I try to make the separate testing team a virtual separate testing team. There's always 2 different dimensions, and it seems that it works in organizations if every 3 years we have it virtual and every 3 years we have it physical team. And then we have this like natural, fluctuation of having those conversations that need to happen in order to not suffer from entropy, which is actually eating up the results. So usually my rule is change every 3 years. Don't choose either or.
Okay. What is your best memory from testing?
Best memory. I always remember the recent stuff. Best memory. So I would probably think kind of like surprises with bugs that are so complicated that no one could do them intentionally. Those usually become my best memories. So the one that I'm kind of first thinking of is one where we had this like an end-to-end system of many different teams. And when you booted on the one end, you booted the device. On the other end, it was reporting all of the data missing for 12 hours. And since they were so far away, we didn't realize what the user's experience was. And walking through that conversation from the concrete demoable thing on how it works for the user, I absolutely loved that conversation. It was wonderful.
And it was wonderful listening to you. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. A huge applause for Maaret, please, for our first keynote speaker.